Greetings everyone, Nathan Nerdarchy here from Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds, and today we're going to be talking about law and order, culture, and crime, and we're doing world building. And with me, I've got a nerd.
I am Kienata, and I know that the mageocracy will be a topic, but I feel like we should start on a broader scale.
It won't be the only topic, but we're absolutely going to talk about the mageocracy.
The mageocracy. You're criminals, spellcasters, witch.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so one thing I want to talk about with this, to start off, is that every kind of like group of people has some kind of rules. Either they're assumed rules, and you don't know about them until you break one of them, and then you find out the hard way, or there are rules that are actually written down for everybody to say, yep, this is how we're going to roll, this is how it's going to happen, deal with it, and we're going to enforce it if you do something bad, or socially ostracize you if all we've got is social ostracization.
Right. You can't talk about law without including culture. Sometimes laws are based off of religion. Sometimes laws are based off of characteristics that the culture believes. Sometimes it could be, we could get into a very long discussion about what people perceive as good or evil. That's this could be very broad, but I think we're just going to narrow it down.
Yeah, we're not going to talk necessarily about, we're not going to talk about the morality of the laws. We're going to talk about what happens when they're there. And that could be that you're like, this law is so ridiculous, and your character would think it's so ridiculous, or perhaps your character thinks it's ridiculous and you think it's totally fine. But either way, there's you or your group against mushrooms. That's all he's saying. Sorry, broke because of chat. It's your group versus whatever you're interacting with, in a sense. Or it could be inner group as well. I mean, let's say, really simplistic, the rogue, also known as the thief, more appropriately in 2nd edition. The thief or the rogue snitches some stuff and doesn't tell the group. He's like, oh yeah, I plundered this thing, or this person didn't tell anybody, and lo and behold, it comes to light that months or years later, you find out he's got all this bling and stuff that he's been able to afford, or magic items that he's appropriated from what could have been the communal group stuff, but no one said anything about communally dividing things. They just kind of all said, well, I'd like that. Okay, well, if you took that, I want to take this gold. And if you took that, I want to take this armor. And that's the way it's all figured out. We do not speak of the Kender. What about the Kender?
Well, but the Kender gives a great example. Culturally speaking, kleptomania is totally fine for them. But in other cultures, say a normal human culture, it's absolutely unacceptable for someone to just walk up and pocket someone else's belongings.
No matter how shiny or interesting it looked.
Right. And the same thing could be said of you could have a traveling companion that comes from a tribal culture, and you're out in the battlefield fighting, and when all of you leave the battlefield, you didn't think about it, but you threw one of your hand axes, buried it in an ogre, and didn't pick it up at the end of the battle. You didn't think about it. Now this person from this tribal culture says, well, he left it there, so I want it, now it's mine. So now you have a party member who's picked up one of your things and thinks they have every right to it. You left it, you didn't want it anymore, or you'd have picked it up when the fight was over.
And that could just be simply, maybe there's a big, like, cultural thing against, like, basically, what is that called? When everybody in the culture is like, don't do this. Basically a cultural kind of stigma against wasting things. So if you were left a tool or something somewhere, well, basically you left your possession of it as well, because that could get out in the rain. Someone else who will take better care of that tool comes along and says, this has been improperly used, I'm going to take this away. It is now mine because I'm going to treat it better.
There is another thing that I adore exploring, especially when you're exposing player characters to it, and you can do anything with this. Any culture can be adapted to this. For me, and hey everybody in chat, how's everybody doing? I love to take halflings, and the way I make halflings culturally distinct is I say halflings don't have any sense. What's that?
Cannibals?
No, no sense of ownership.
All right, that's also interesting.
A halfling has no sense of ownership. Culturally, no one owns things. And there are some real world precedent for people not owning things, but basically they're like, well, you can't own land, you can't own trees, you can't own animals. Why would you be able to own, any number of other things?
This particular knife.
Yeah, exactly. I'm using it right now, but I could be dead tomorrow, so someone else could pick it up and use it.
Well,
so yeah.
Then you get made dead, and then they've got free access to your stuff.
And then they have your knife.
Yes. Now, the reason cultures that have that concept don't fall apart is because they have all these other things that buttress and support that main concept, or one of the concepts. It might not even be. That might be like, oh yeah, that's just the way things are. They don't even think it's a big deal. Well, if I came along with all of my stuff, and I said, hey, back up off my things, I'm using them. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I bought them. So unless you want to give me money, get off of it.
I just like having those interactions where they're like, well, look at all the stuff he has. He can't be using all of it.
Yeah.
He's definitely not doing these. Coins seem useless, but one of them for me, I could use this. Maybe it's like a fishing lure, or I'll hammer it out into something, or you could make something pretty with them. So I'll just take all your gold coins so I can make something pretty. Like, just cultures with no sense of ownership are fantastic. Someone mentioned Kender, very much like Kender.
A whole pack of Kenderlings. They don't have to be Kenders, they just have to have the attitude. Yeah, so I'm not too keen on that type of thing, but I could see.
Sorry.
I could see many player characters or many players not being down for that at all, especially their starting equipment's like their hard-earned. This is all they've got in the world that costs money. Having that taken from them just simply because it didn't seem like they needed it at the time or use it, or hey, they've got 5 daggers. Why do they need 5? I'll just pocket the one that's hidden, and then they'll find out later.
Behind the screen asks, so are we talking about theft? What we're talking about is ultimately this conversation is going to revolve around law. But law, mind you, I didn't say law and order, I said just law, is reflective of culture more often than not. So first we thought we'd dive into talking a little bit about culture, maybe even a little about religion, and how those things would affect law, and then we can make determinations on what kinds of different systems of law you might see.
I would say there is a predictability to even the craziest and chaotic of cultures, such as the Drow. You know what they're going to be doing. You might not know exactly how they're going to kill everybody else and take over the world, but you know that's what they're trying to do.
Yes.
For the most part. Like if we take Menza Bronzem, from what people know about Menza Bronzem from previous books and previous settings, it's a pretty nasty place, and even though it's chaotic crazy all the time, and 3 ways to evil, you know that there's a certain kind of level that you expect out of it when you consider it an activity. Do you know what I mean? So there's almost an order to their culture, even though their culture is chaos based.
I love to pick on dwarves.
I know you do. I just thought about that earlier. I said, poor dwarves.
Well, most people would say, well, dwarves are really well defined in lots and lots of fantasy. And I always argue that they're absolutely not. They have all these glaring holes in their existence. But I would say we're in a dwarven hold. We're all in the mountain. We're mining and we're making things. And you decide to steal something from me. Now, do you have any reference material to say what the punishment is?
Reference material in Dwarven culture?
Sure. Any Dwarven culture, any Dwarven fantasy culture you can think of.
I would say, depending on your age, if you're still considered a young person, you'd probably get slapped upside the head by an elder and said, hey, don't do this again, or you know what's going to happen to you.
What would happen?
I would eventually think that if you were an adult and you maybe have been this kid that's stealing stuff, and then 50 years later you steal a couple more things, I'd say you get banished. Like right out the gate, just banishment.
And this is based on the fact that Dwarven society is held together really closely by Dwarven clans. And so banishment really is like a legitimately horrible punishment.
Yeah, and then you better lie, even though you shouldn't. Just one more undwarven thing you do is you lie when you get out there and be like, yeah, I'm just merchanting, I'm traveling, I want to see the world.
So then the next question comes up. What is your reference material?
I would say that my reference material is just simply what I would think dwarves would be okay with doing to another dwarf in their clan, and what they would not be okay with doing to another dwarf in their clan. And I would say that they would not be okay with physically punishing them or maiming them.
What I guess what I'm driving at is like, what tells you that dwarves have a strong family culture, a strong clan-based culture?
Well, they have not murdered each other to the dwarf, and they live in holes in the ground. Just think about that. Imagine living with your closest 50 relatives, and you're all still alive at the end. After 100 or 200 years. That's what I'm going on. You've got to have some cultural lock-ins into that, like rules that kind of prevent total chaos from forming.
That's okay. So,
if you're trying to get me to say the 5th Drizzt Do'Urden book, page 700 and whatever, I'm not going to be able to do it. Just to let you know.
Well, this is my problem. Is that currently Dwarven culture, when you ask people to tell you where their reference material, it's usually a combination of different chunks of D&D stuff, different D&D novels, and Tolkien. And so you end up with this kind of mishmash where and I should not leave out Warhammer because a lot of people like Warhammer Fantasy Dwarves. But if you talk to people, it's always a mishmash of cultures. So I would impress on anyone that was going to define dwarves in their own world building exercise. Make something up, make it unique, do something different. And when you're creating the dwarves, remember 2 things. What do they eat and what is their code of ethics? Because that is the most infrequently discussed items for dwarves. Nobody wants to talk about where the food came from, and nobody wants to talk about bad dwarves. They're like, no,
people.
Everybody works together apparently. Nobody commits crimes. We're all good people.
Yeah, because they're not literally dead, but they're socially and culturally dead if they commit a whole bunch of crimes. They're gone. That's why. Nobody. When they say nobody, it's air quotes. That's my thing.
See, I believe that the concept of cultures that are stagnant like that doesn't mesh with me. For me, I want to see cultural variety. I want to see differences in culture, and therefore, what we're talking about tonight, difference in law.
Okay, well, I would say in a dwarf defense, we don't have the view of living for 400 or 500 years. And second, I don't think dwarves' psychology, like what we think of as a dwarf, I don't think their cultural upbringing and other things lend to the new generation trying to burn down everything that the old generations have done, because they've got a great new idea. I remember being a part of that youngest generation, and yeah, I had the best ideas. And that's because we're humans. And that's just the way the newbies, you always have this rebellion stage. And I don't really think dwarves go through much of a rebellion stage. I think they almost pop out with a beard and like a hammer and an anvil, like a mini anvil. Ding, ding, ding. I know they pop out with it. That's ridiculous, but you know what I'm saying. Like, It's hammered into them.
And I see several people in chat answering the question of what dwarves eat. I wrote an entire article on what dwarves eat in Nerdarchy, and my world building exercise was they have farm animals that living inside of a mountain and outside of a mountain does not mean there's two different races of dwarf. I think that I'm going to express myself very strongly here. I think that's very silly. All the dwarves are the same race. I know please leave your hate comments and down below. And dwarves would farm oats because oats are a very realistic crop for them to grow near mountain homes. Oats would
could also
grow
have high elevation wheat, like in Upper New York State or whatever. That's kind of like cold and stuff.
Well, I was thinking more of like Iceland. Like, what do you grow in Iceland?
Very important thing. Kyle Ellis and some other people might have brought it up. Female dwarves in Ulfgenia do not have beards. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I literally just sat down and talked to my female players and my wife and other women.
And none of them were interested in playing a bearded female?
Well, I was like, I'm defining dwarves right now, and I'm interested in what you guys think of the idea that female dwarves have beards. And without exception, every single one of them was like, that's really stupid. And I was like, okay, no beards. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
They did like the idea of them having chops. Some people like the idea of them having like more hair here.
Like sideburns?
Yeah, like enough to braid. And I was like, I guess that's kind of cool. That could work.
They could like braid it up and then...
Yeah, you could like, still be very pretty with big old chops.
Some kind of Princess Leia spiral. They could have like...
I think chops could work on a dwarf. We're totally off topic, by the way.
Yeah, sorry. But hey, you know, sometimes the style of dress and stuff is informed by culture and other things as well. But I'm not much of a fashion person, so I'm much more interested in talking about things like mageocracies. So, now that we're off the dwarf, let's go on to something else.
Okay.
So in general, we're talking about law and order and crime, culture and crimes and all that kind of stuff. But really, this isn't just because we feel like jibber jabbering for 2 hours about it.
Nate, is the music too high? Do you have music playing?
No. Music's too high? Sure, yeah, I can turn it down.
Yeah. Okay.
I kind of wanted the background. My kids are all up still. I just got home not too long ago before we started.
Ramon said it was a little high.
Yeah.
So I figured.
Well, I hope that's better. It's probably almost nothing now. So hopefully that is cool with everybody. And I have a tendency to not talk loud enough. So that's going to interfere with the music. You're welcome, Ramon. Okay. So getting back to the whole thing with the law and order thing. So we're talking about this not just because we want to jibber jabber for 2 hours about it, but we do want to talk about it for 2 hours. But the idea
my plan.
The idea that how are you going to use it in the game is what we'll talk about later. But for right now, we're just going to kind of like set the stage on what we're talking about with law and order, and then later, the latter half, we'll talk about using it in your game and how to incorporate it into things. So a lot of things you want to consider when you're talking about the laws of the land is what kind of governmental system you have, and what size are you talking about. So for example, in a widespread kind of fantasy land where you're not by the city and you're probably out like frontier, or you're in between two empires and you're kind of the outskirts that don't really matter.
The endless temperate forest.
Yeah, temperate forest wherever you are. Because you haven't chopped it all down yet to make houses and steel. So if you haven't done those things to the area, then you're going to have this kind of wild land where the culture of the individuals in that area kind of will shape what occurs and how strangers are treated, how people coming in from different nations, merchants, how they're all treated, how really, whether or not you say, oh, you're an outsider, and is that a bad thing? So somebody, if you have a cult in the area or a religious group that has founded an area, they may consider that like maybe outside talking with other people is a bad thing. So as an outsider, you kind of like already have a bad stigma on you. So you better be on your best behavior, which includes probably following laws that you don't know about. But maybe you get a pass. Maybe you just get the big O stamped on your forehead, And they're just like, you get a pass because we know you're not from around here, so we won't just, you know, stone you to death or string you up or dunk you in the well or whatever. Whatever they do.
The other uses for this are having your players meet with cultures that you can use as a role-playing experience to literally enforce culture shock. Mm-hmm. So your players, are traveling through swampy wilderness and they see a village. It looks very well constructed and very well taken care of, but it's in the middle of a swamp. They travel into the village and find out this is all lizard folk. And the lizard folk are very welcoming, and they invite the traveling players to a feast. And the feast is sentient creatures. Like they're cooking orcs. Or, you know what I mean? Or maybe they're consuming bugbears just raw, but they cooked a chunk of bugbear for the players because they know humans and elves don't eat uncooked meat, so they're trying to be amiable. So it's throwing culture shock at people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes culture shock is a really incredible role-playing tool.
Yes, and also it's we're kind of jumping to the second half, but speaking about culture shock, there might be a situation where a quest is available to the player characters because of someone's trying to escape that culture, or someone's trying to say like, hey, I don't want to be married over to such and such, or I don't want to be punished for doing something that maybe you don't think is a crime, but the people do from that culture, and you're like, all right, help me, get me out of here. So do you take on that risk and risk the ire of a whole group of people to try and basically satisfy your own understanding of where the cultural line is on justice and punishment and things like that? Mm-hmm. And it might be very important.
Oh, I'm just agreeing.
Okay, it may be very important to the order of the world in that area and how it functions, because basically any system you create that's supposed to govern people or kind of keep people in like a bubble of activity. So you have, I don't want to get too complex in this, but let's get a little complex. So basically, we're all playing a game in real life. We're playing a game. Everybody knows how to play games. We learn it from a very young age. Every game has rules. I know that if Kienata and I were in the same room, for the most part, if I don't do certain things, he will not try and kill me, or yell at me, or throw stuff at me, or just maybe have a bad day.
I'm a hard person to upset. You'd be hard pressed.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. So I would say that's a game we play. I know the rules to that game to not upset him, and he knows the rules to the game to not upset me, because we are culturally similar enough in our understanding of each other, or we know each other's cultural rules. And when you know the rules, we're talking about rules here. The rules of the game of how we interact in our separate cultures is going to kind of determine when we're going to have like friction and have problems. So here's a real life example. I worked with a large group of Japanese people in a kitchen I worked in. Mm-hmm. At one point, one of the older gentlemen, he bowed at me. And I was like, I have no idea how to respond to that. So at one point I just asked him, and I said, well, can you show me like how do I bow back? So he showed me how to bow back, but then all of a sudden my brain started to go to like movies where it's like they bow, so you're supposed to bow lower and all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And literally he bowed, so I bowed really low, and he goes, it's not a competition. And I was like, I'm an idiot, thanks. Well, what you probably said is, I like back and forth, you like overdid it. There was probably like a little incremental extra you were supposed to do as the younger person.
Yeah, ignorance is an ugly thing.
But you like doubled down. You're like...
Yeah, he was like, what are you doing? Yeah, so... But not understanding each other's cultures and how cultures and how religions can affect legal systems. But legal systems have a lot of twists and turns to them. What is the legal system if you're the king?
Well, back in the day, if you go to like let's go for the might makes right. Okay.
Mm.
And let's say might makes right and Magna Carta time. So when like lords and other things like that were like, hey king, you just can't say we're traitors, take all of our land and kill our family. That's like, that should be against the rules, or we're going to have to throw down, or something's going to have to go on. So you've got Mike Makes Right, which basically the king and all of his people that he wants to say are okay and cool have run on the land, in essence, until he says otherwise, or until someone kills him and takes that spot. So there's an order to that, but there's also a lot of chaos involved in that, because anytime someone says, all right, I've had enough of this, I'm going to risk death to take this person out and get rid of them, and then I'll be the king. And when I'm the king, everything will be happy, sunshine, and roses. Says everybody who ever tried to be king ever.
Every despot.
Yeah, every despot said he had a better mousetrap and tried to initiate it. So you've got that system, and then you have the Magna Carta, kind of like, I'm super simplifying it, by the way, but that idea that people have said, hey, we have a certain amount of legal right to not just be said, hey, the king's got basically the ability to just off us if he wants.
Yes.
For whatever which reason he wants. I mean, it could be something as simple as, hey, I want your wife, so you're a traitor, I'm going to kill you. To, I want your land back, and I didn't feel like thinking about how to get it back, so if I just say you're a traitor, I can get rid of you. That kind of thing. So, like, protections in that sense. So then there's protections for people, and then adding more and more protections weakens the overall power of the king to directly be a detriment in the individual's life. I mean, they could still say, hey, we're going to round people up and we're going to go to war, which is a giant pain in the butt. But at the same time...
I hate doing that. That's terrible.
It's not... I mean, to the people involved that didn't have any say in it. But that is like on a different level from the king just can say whatever he wants and it's going to be enacted to the power that and the reach that he has.
And we have a few comments in chat. Things get more complicated when you start adding culture and religious spiritual beliefs into the matter of law. Absolutely. And Defiant Mars, because of the fact that we're attempting to make, as a world builder, you have to recognize limitation. You cannot fill in every nuance or you'll be world building for the rest of your life.
Yes.
So in order to fill in enough nuance to make it effective as a tool for storytelling, you really just want to get the surface stuff, the things that are going to be the most important. And sometimes that does mean being a little contrived, like putting in a scenario where the lizard folk in the village are eating a sentient creature just to, nick away at the moral values of your players and see what they say. But you really can't create every single nuanced idea that's going to be behind it. I strongly recommend, when going down this path of world building, to reference the real world for lots and lots of stuff.
Yes, and you can also say, simplify thing, and I don't like labeling things to reduce them, but at the same time, it's a necessity when you're world building, because you have to make a note for yourself. So you can almost use the culture you understand the best as a mile marker, and not mine, but whatever one you understand to be your reality of what you either want to live in, or you've read up the most, or you understand the best. So it's most likely the stuff that you see around you, yours. So you want to kind of use that as a central thing, and then say, well, how far over to one way or the other, which direction do I want to take this? If I'm in the center of the circle, where do I want to move towards? Do I want to move towards like chaotic concepts? Do I want to move towards more lawful concepts beyond what I have? Do I want to move more towards more like what you consider evil or altruism, like altruistic to, I guess, selfishness? Maybe that would be one of the parameters. And then you can take that from where you are and move it a little bit and say, okay, well, if something was super chaotic compared to me, then there'd probably be a reduction in the laws binding stuff, or the laws would not promote order when they should. Like maybe they don't promote, maybe they promote order as far as the upper echelon is concerned, like the aristocracy is like, yeah, everything seems good to us, we're good, we're fine. But then when you're on, like, let's say the peasant level or the common level, and you look around and you go, all right, this is like Bedlam. We're like, people are killing people on the streets, you know, all this kind of crazy stuff is going on. There's not enough order for us. And that could be a talking point for when you come into a city and you're just like, all right, the merchant lane is totally clean and fine, and the city on the hill is just great, but everything else is total crazy nuts.
We have a few questions. So Corey Hollenbach says, question, death sentence or no death sentence? How does this affect the population and drama of actions?
Well,
I find in power-centric cultures, there's a king, there's nobles, then there's everybody else. The death sentence is pretty common.
yes.
Because human life has less value.
Well, it has.
When you live
It's
in the
kind of-
high tower, it's hard to
Okay,
accept.
when
I'm sure as a noble, your life has value.
Yes, if you're the guys making the laws, like I said, if you're the guys making the laws and you've set yourself up so you're cool and everything's fine for the most part, and you don't really care what happens to anybody underneath you, that's a large percentage of the population. And then you're going to say, well, we'll just enforce it. So if they do a bad enough thing, we'll just have to get rid of them so they're wiped away from the face of the earth. And then they won't influence your culture anymore. So there's a good thing and a bad thing here. First off, your culture overall is more brutal, but you're not stuck with the people that might make it actually worse. Do you know what I mean?
I think the clash of cultures is kind of a classic concept. I have a monarch, you don't. You run through a system. I mean, was it Greece? Greece ruled through. Oh man, now I'm gonna look like a goofball.
You brought it up.
Greece
I can't
rule
help you.
through a chamber of citizens? Were they the ones that ruled through the chamber of citizens? And then they'd vote on things with the white stones and the black stones? I'm pretty sure it was Greek.
I'll go
So
with that.
with them, they valued reason, but there were lots of people around them that were ruled by kings or chieftains that thought a bunch of people standing around throwing stones in a bucket to decide what happens. That's idiotic. We've got a king over here. He just tells us what goes down. You're crazy, you know? So, and of course, those lead to cultural clashes, especially when a culture that relies entirely on reason and a culture that relies entirely on one person's whims have to decide where the border of their territories is. So, and we had another question. What laws do you use in most cases? And some for evil kingdoms. Typically, evil kingdoms are more based on cultural norms for me. So, like, they don't really have a set of laws, like in most of my stuff. But even evil kingdoms, if they're like big organized kingdoms, I might have a set of laws for them. But that depends. Mageocracy is evil.
Because magic is bad.
Because, well, yeah, if they think magic is bad, and there's a bunch of perfectly normal people running around that can cast spells, and they're like, look, we haven't had any wars or any problems for 1,000 years because every time we find a magic user, we burn them at the stake.
Or we induct them into the military. So
Yeah,
now
exactly.
we're a worldwide empire.
So at some point, is it okay to kill a tree to save a forest at that point? Is it okay? Are you making your culture or your kingdom better by just killing every single mage you run across or inducting every single one of them? Or is it worse? Is it worse because you're clearly putting less value on those people's lives?
Well, I guess it depends on how collective you are to how individualistic you are. Whether or not you think it's okay to kill mages no matter what they've done. Pretty much. And that's going to be a question for you to answer based on what you're trying to get across to your players. Because if you're trying to, players and their characters can really throw you through a loop, and one of the ways they can do that is acting contrary to what you think they're going to do. So if you're like, oh right, they're gonna come upon this mageocracy, and it's gonna be totally evil, because they're gonna think that this is totally wrong, that mages get killed as soon as they're found out. Well, mages that live there. Maybe they can let visiting mages come as long as they got like a 30-day visa, and then they have to be out because they can't stay to influence the country. Maybe they figured out that they just can't handle archmages when they decide to stroll through the property, so they just let them go about their business, but they aren't allowed to stay. So you've got this mageocracy, which is actually would be the opposite of mageocracy because they'd be killing mages. But anyway, magic is a key thing for what they're governing for. So they're governing to get rid of mages, and you're like, all right, the player characters and the players are going to think that this is terrible and it's abhorrent, and they must do something about it. And yeah, then they're going to be like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, just don't say you're a mage. And we're just going to walk on through here. And
I always have sniffers.
Like, but I have like 6 months of material to go through here because you're supposed to be upset about this. Yeah, so
I prefer the approach to always have a sniffer. But what if we dial it back a little bit, and we do basic Western fantasy. You're a player character. You just attempted to pickpocket. You saw a guy who had a bunch of nice stuff on him. You tried to pickpocket. You failed. It's the middle of the market, so there's like 15 guards. The group isn't going to win the fight. You all go to jail. So basic concepts. How long are you in jail? What's the punishment for stealing? Are all of your friends on the hook for the same crime as you?
Because you can't tell technically who stole it or if you all helped them.
Right.
So they're just going to toss you all in jail. Guilt by association. And that might just simply be because, I mean, they don't have modern forensics. So, what are you to do when it comes down to it? What are you supposed to do when you're like, all right, we know you took it. It's pretty much hearsay on what you said about it, but hey, we're going to put you all in jail until we figure out whether or not you're guilty or not. And that is something that can legit happen, especially if you don't have things like cameras and ways of actually viewing what occurred. Aaron Parks brought up Detect Live, but what if you don't have magic to use?
Right.
You know, that kind of situation, you're basically, it's a person in the town accuses you of something. If you're from outside of the town, you're already fighting an uphill battle. Because it's basically their word against yours. I mean, if you stole it, then I mean they're being honest and telling you. But you know, that's one of the things. I mean, what is it? Is it perjury when you lie to a jury or a judge?
It's perjury.
Yeah. And you can also do that legally by writing, you know, signing something and saying yes, this is true when it's not. So yes. I mean, most of the places that have a high level of desire for the truth in law will have those kind of things where if you lie in the proceeding or trying to get somebody in jail when they're not supposed to be, you can get your own set of charges brought against you for it. But when it's just person's word versus another person's word, they're going to take the validity is going to be increased for the person that seems more honorable or that they know better. So,
well, we also have to take contrast here, because it's very important to remember, and Winnie the Fox just pointed something out in Twitch chat, that would all depend on the development level of the town. And just what I'd like to point out with that is, if you have a massive city and the guards grabbed you and put you in jail, the likelihood of there being a corrupt individual to pay to get out of jail goes up exponentially, just because there's more people in the same space. If you take that same scenario and it's a super tiny town and you get, you know, busted in the inn trying to steal something, trying to pickpocket something, and it's the constable and his two thug buddies, well, their version of justice is going to be wildly different than what's accepted. You also have to remember, this might be another good thing to talk about, is consistency of law over a kingdom.
All right.
Because there would be no consistency. They don't have phones to check what's going down. They don't, I mean, in most cases, other than very rigid legal systems where that's a major part of the culture, I would say legal enforcement's going to be very, very much up to the constable or person that you're talking to at the time.
If your kingdom's less than like 1,000 years old, most likely everyone in the world, everyone in that kingdom doesn't know all the rules that they have to follow, and most likely there's not a lot of rules. At least ones that people go, the people on the prairie, you don't have to worry about this. We won't even tell them we changed something. Because it's never going to come up unless they go into the city. And they're probably never going to go to the city, so it doesn't matter. So there is that kind of, because the slowdown in distribution of information, as well as what the individual is expected to know by the time they reach maturity. And by that I mean no extraneous information they don't really need to live. Like... I'm not saying they were less educated in that sense. I'm saying that they didn't need to know as much, I would say, to function. Like, I need to know all kinds of rules for driving. I don't need that to live. I just need that because of the place I'm at and what I choose to do. I choose to drive a vehicle. So there's all these extra rules I need to know. So if you were in a city and you were a merchant and you were trying to sell something to somebody who is a foreigner, you may have to pay a tariff on that. And boy, you better know you need to pay a tariff on that. If you were like the last city in the kingdom, the last town in the kingdom before the other person's kingdom, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm technically supposed to get a tariff from you, but who the heck cares?
There's also other really important things. If you leave, let's say your party is traveling in my kingdom, and you know that my kingdom is at war with your kingdom, and we have our party of adventurers, and our party of adventurers travels into your kingdom, there are so many reasons that it could go south.
Spies.
Well, not even being caught at the border or someone thinking you're a spy immediately. Maybe you just made a bunch of transactions in my kingdom and you show up with money minted by me in your kingdom. They might confiscate all your money.
Yeah. This is unlawful currency.
No,
we won't reimburse you.
Yeah, no, we won't reimburse you. We're going to melt it down and turn it into our coins. Have a nice day. We took all your money. I had a group of players. They kill the dragon. They get the gold. I don't even think it was a dragon. They kill the dragon. They get the gold. They have all this currency. And then they find out that this currency is from this super ancient, super evil kingdom, and no one wants it. So my players are scrambling on how to melt gold into ingots or platinum into ingots in order to figure out what to do with it. Yeah.
And you know what? You melt enough gold into ingots, you're going to catch somebody's eye.
Somebody's going to notice.
You're going to screw up our economy bringing that stuff in. Where did you get it? And we're going to confiscate some of it.
Yeah, and marks. A bunch of old world economies had marks on gold and silver and even copper and bronze. They would have marks on the ingots. And if you didn't have a marked ingot or a coin, it was illegal to have it.
Well, because they could say to themselves, well, we have 3 gold mines in the entirety of the kingdom. And you've got a lot of gold, as if you mined it from one of our gold mines or stole a wagon of it and then melted it down to try and pass it off as not something you stole.
Right, exactly.
It's like equivalent to carrying around bags full of houses and being like, nope, we just got these from someplace.
Yeah.
We swear we didn't steal a whole bunch of people's houses and put them in a portable hall.
So yeah, so if you have players traveling around with a portable hole full of gold, that could be contraband for any number of reasons to any number of kingdoms.
And that is a good point. Level of suspicion in a culture, level of suspicion by the government, and level of suspicion in the laws. So there's stuff that favors you. I know in my culture, there's stuff that favors you as, hey, innocent until proven guilty for the most part. But then there's the instance where they're trying to prove you guilty and they assume you are. And then you've got issues with that because you're just trying to get out of this like cyclical, hey, I swear I'm not being suspicious. Why don't you get off my back about it? So imagine you show up, someone's like eyeing you like, hey, you've done a few things wrong here. can I like search through your wagon just to like, you know, hey, if you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have to worry about it, right? Yeah. And then you've got giant bricks of gold with no maker's mark on them, no mountain or mine that they've been refined at, and they're just like, okay, so what's this about? Because you better tell me a really good story that I'm going to actually believe, and don't tell me you killed no dragon and then melted down the gold. Because I ain't gonna believe that. Nobody's going to believe you.
Nobody's going to believe you unless you fly in riding a Pegasus. No one believes that you killed
with a freaking glowing flaming sword.
Yeah, exactly. You did what?
Have lightning in your eyes.
Yeah. So I think another fun thing, because we realized as we started talking about this topic before we started the stream tonight, there's so much information here that we could cover that there is no way in the world we'll get all of it tonight. But we could stop in on many topics. Here's something I love to touch on.
Before you get into that, Alex C says, unless you have the dragon's head, you better stuff that dragon's head with all the treasure, all right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's the only way they're going to be like, okay, we believe you.
Ramon Dizol, Corey's idea, make an episode on coins, currency, and trade. Oh man, we could go all day with that.
There's so like how to screw up people's economies and stuff, and like make that an adventure and things.
Seriously, and if you want a hint, if you have a savvy GM that's a world builder like me and he's looking for ways to catch you up, gems are the credit card of D&D. Nobody, they don't have to be marked. Nobody knows where they came from. They're worth different amounts to different people. They're the credit card. But so let's say that I'm a group of adventurers and you just caught me for doing something bad and you're trying to enforce the law. And someone mentioned branding earlier. So let's use branding as the example. You're going to brand me. I am so vehemently against this that I'm willing to violently fight back. And you know that means certain death. The player group wants to fight its way out of prison and there's like 50 guards, like a contingent from a military unit. These players are dead if they do that. So how would you deal with that? Because that's something I've dealt with as a games master, and I'm certain plenty of people here have dealt with before.
Are you asking specifically for my opinion or theirs?
Specifically your opinion. How would you deal with the group of players who have decided that they're going to fight against the castle guards? They refuse to be branded. Maybe my Bromeo is a Kender and he pickpocketed someone and now he's going to get his hand chopped off. It was his choice.
Well, is it really a Kender's choice not to take things? The poor thing.
Yeah. So how do you as a GM try and resolve this?
Okay, so how I resolve it? As a GM, I would say, hey, the guards want to do this. They act like they have the complete right and are actively enacting a law to do this. What are you going to do about it?
And the players are like, we're going to kill everyone. But that's never going to happen. They're dead if they do that.
Well, let's say they do that. We're going to fight the little group of guards. They could probably beat the little group of guards that's probably enacting. Sure. Because it's probably like, hey, if in that culture, it's probably you saw someone steal something, you had enough evidence to convict them, chop their hand off right now. That could be it. Like, bam. It could only be like the local elder on the street has to come by and talk to you. And then, bam, he can appoint you as the hand chopper offer. So you go through that's going to occur, and you fight the little group that's there. Well, now you've probably either killed or maimed guards who were enacting a lawful duty.
Which is evil, if you're fuzzy on that. That was an evil thing to do. Please continue.
Yes, regardless of the situation, you're now... you one-up them with a hand chopping off, and you've now killed people. And now they're going to, once you dead, they're going to attack you. And probably if hand chopping was what you got for thieving, they're probably just going to kill you without question. And then after enough bodies stack up, some kind of holy warrior is going to come after you, or a set of them, because you're a menace to society.
Yeah.
And need to be stopped. Or, 70 guards will show up, or whatever they need to wrangle up. The army will be mobilized if you keep slaughtering guardsmen, stuff like that, who really don't have a lot of fighting skill, comparatively speaking. And then you're going to deal with veteran soldiers and things like that. So that's what I would say would going to happen. So basically, it's a run for the border, like a literal run for the border, and so hope that the next kingdom is not as friendly with the kingdom you're trying to run away from, or town or whatever.
So you would do give the players a heroic escape.
Yes, heroically run away.
For me, I session zero this kind of thing. I very, very rarely have any kind of TPK event happen. I try and give players a way out. All they have to do is make intelligent choices. That doesn't always happen.
But you say there's a Kender in the party, so we're already past that point.
Yes. So
sorry, Kender hate. I'm sorry.
No, I really don't like Kenders. I'm totally fine with that. But I try and give players a heroic way out. But impacting upon players that the guard who's giving you the stink eye and is like trying to shake you down at the front gate of a city.
We're gonna need a 15 gold tax, 5 gold for each of you to get in today.
It might be the best idea to just pay him the money instead of saying this is a shakedown, and then the guys on the tower shoot you with crossbows, and now you're running through the wilderness again. Yeah. So anyway, all right.
Okay, so yeah, that's how I'd handle that. Is they would get into a thing. Either they could just escape. Maybe they just we're not just gonna fight these guys because they're trying to do something. We're just gonna run.
Yeah.
That's gonna be better, because then we are going to chop off one of your guys' hands and you've evaded arrest. That's not terrible as we killed guards and now they're after us.
I will give a hint as to the way I typically resolve this. If I have a group of people who are fighting someone, and in the first 20 seconds of the fight, that group of people has 3 people die horrible deaths by the insanely skilled swordsman, the rest of them don't hang out to see how long it's going to take to die. They run to get help, because that's what I do.
Yes.
Yeah, we're trying to fight I don't know who Batman in the other room. He killed 4 people.
But he's murdering people, so terrible Batman.
I don't even know, one of them had sparks coming out of their face. Do you want to come lend a hand? And typically that's my window for players to get away. So that's...
Yeah, the rest of the guards ran away to get more. All right, now we leave as fast as possible.
Okay, so we probably should wait until the last half hour to fully deep dive the mageocracy, because there's going to be so much.
Well, I mean, we're talking about how you could use it in your game as well. So
it's just
what do we want to?
It's just world building advice.
World building advice for using laws and culture and stuff to kind of jumpstart things. So, okay, so going back to that concept, I would say if you're doing your own world from scratch, definitely borrow from things and kind of use your own culture that you understand the best as your zero, and you can move around from that point, making it more chaotic, neutral, lawful, whatever. Barbaric to civil, all those kind of whatever kind of line you want to draw through it. And then just say, well, what would make, comparatively speaking to what you've got, what would make it more barbaric? What would make it more civil? What would make it more bureaucratic? And make, I don't know, bureaucracy has its own kind of insidious nature to it. So you can...
I use a really simple equation when I'm trying to understand what laws would probably be like with a culture. I usually go, how much wealth does the culture have? How badly do the rich people want to hang on to their wealth? And the more of a crust that the wealth would create, the more high-level wealthy people there are, the more laws there are for the lessers in order to, the peasants, in order to assure that the wealthy people get to keep their money.
Excuse me.
Well, unless we're talking about
the closing, that would be the closing the door concept, where you're well, no more people advancing to the aristocracy.
Right.
And back in the old days, that would be simply, well, there's 10 noble houses, and you don't just get in by having a lot of money.
Right. Right.
Because the last 2 guys got in there by having a lot of money, and we're done with that. Screw that noise. So, you know, you've got this concept where you've got the 10 noble houses, and you have the king, and then they're not allowing anybody to gain that upper echelon regardless of wealth and power and things. And at that point, if you've got people that are really kind of stuck on that, they may be trying to overthrow the system because maybe they've amassed a lot of wealth. And they're like, well, we still don't have the political power. We can still be abused like peasants. But we got all this money and all this power amongst those groups. And you could have a whole campaign settled around the idea of a rebellion that you think is started by some outlier groups or cults or just people dissatisfied or disenfranchised, when then you really find out that it's this like middle ground merchant houses who actually just want to toss the whole system aside, get rid of all the nobles and all the kings, and set up some kind of guild.
Right, and that's not uncommon.
Excuse me. Well, I mean, you're always going to have people disinterested in keeping the way the current hierarchy is ordered. And if they've got lots of money, they can do something about it more easily and readily than other groups. And unless you're shocked, it looks like you're frozen. Yeah. So we'll just wait until Kienata rejoins. He might have to shut off his computer and turn it back on. But anyway, so as I was saying, with the... Sorry, let me collect my thoughts here. Yeah, Defiant Mars, a merchant republic of some form. Yeah, that's what it would kind of like look at. And bear with us as he comes back, because right now I just have a half a head. So let's ignore that for right now. I'm not going to adjust it. I'll just move myself. Oh, yeah, Corey. Yeah, so you could have mafia groups. I mean, it could be organized crime. Well, it's crime until they make the rules. So it's crime until they get rid of the nobles and they get rid of the king. And then it's just a whole bunch of guys with money making decisions about the way the world works in that region. And from that, you could have things like what's considered legitimate power and what's considered, that more mafiosa kind of power, where you've got organized criminals, organized groups that are committing crimes or abusing the people. Okay, so Aaron Parks, question: what do you think about a variant form of death penalty? Live out your life, but upon death your body is teleported and then animated to serve the kingdom you committed the capital offense. That seems pretty interesting. I like that idea. Almost basically like we allow you to live, but afterwards you have no say in what happens to you. I could see some people I could see it being illegal to burn bodies from that concept. I could see that becoming a thing that you could be basically imprisoned, or you get the penalty for that, as in your body's not your own after you die. But what I would say is that sounds interesting, but it also sounds a little convoluted, because a lot of times you make penalties for crimes because you want to deter those crimes. Or you want to say, it's not so much you want to deter it, it's that you want to say, these are the things in our laws and in our culture that are wrong. Because if you notice, if something's made legal, people start to believe it's not wrong. And if something is made illegal, people start to believe that it's wrong, that it is wrong, regardless of the facts on whether or not it is not wrong or it is wrong. For example, in America, drinking. I can't go if I'm under 21. That's the age of drinking here. Still, I believe I'm too old to remember what it was, what it is now, because it doesn't concern me. But let's say I'm 21, I can go and buy alcohol. It's not a problem. But if I'm 20, I can't. But does that make me drinking alcohol wrong? And I would argue that it does not make that morally wrong. It just simply means you can't legally purchase alcohol. But people equate that to it being a moral wrong. And that's where I would say that that is not correct. But I would also say that that is... that is an issue that comes about. So for some reason, Kienata can't get back in, I believe. So I'm gonna try and get him back in. Okay, his PC crashed, so he's coming back. So I just sent him another link. He should be here soon. So I would like people's opinions on that concept. It's illegal to smash a dwarf's tankard. That should always be wrong, because those things are probably works of art. Or people totally freak out. Too old or drank too many? Question from James Leslie. No, I know they're always changing. I mean, they changed cigarettes from 18 to a higher age limit, but it didn't concern me because of my age. And I would say that but that, you know, but do you understand what I mean? It's like, there's the morality of something, and then there's the legality of something. And what I'm saying is culturally, you're going to have in your own culture, as well as the ones you make, there's things that legality are trying to inform culturally, but they don't always work that way. So you could legally, like I said, you could legally have some, I mean, cutting a Kender's hand off for stealing. Seems a little bit over the top, doesn't it? I mean, it's a Kender. It's just expected that they're going to do that. But if it's in a place that they're like, no, we don't tolerate that. Well, they don't tolerate that because they want to show you with action how wrong it is in their culture to steal. With the idea being, you know the rules of the game now, right? Don't steal or bad things happen. So they want you to play by the game they've written rules for. And the game they've written rules for includes, hey, don't steal or we're going to maim you. And don't do XYZ thing or we're going to execute you. Those are like to say, hey, we're informing you the rules of the game. Don't do these. We don't care if you did them on accident. We're still going to punish you because we have a rule to enforce. We have a reason to uphold it, to gain this kind of this clarity of how you should act in society. Zombies were originally mindless servants. Winnie the Fox. It would make sense. It would make sense for a punishment. Yeah, I actually like that. Old Grumpy, talking about how things are in the U.S. or just made up world, because I'm confused. Sorry, I was just trying to state real world concept, and then take that over into the fantasy world. Old Grumpy. So if you had these rules, you're trying to inform people how you would like the society to act, not necessarily what is good or bad. Do you know what I mean? But to a governmental agency trying to enforce things, what is good makes them do less work, and what is bad makes them actually have to do their job and enforce the laws. Ideally, everyone would just follow the rule and walk in a straight line, because that's the rule, let's say, and anybody that veers off of it would be either self-punishing or say, oh wait, I started to veer off, I need to get back on the line. Or you'd have other people around them enforce the rule for the society. Or at the end, you've got these governmental agencies or the local constable or whatever enforcing that rule for stability and order. So in either case, basically, you can have an adventure, you can have a plot point or a hook or a quest at any one of those points on the group dynamic, the small village dynamic, the guard at a tariff point, you know, and you're found with stuff that you have to get taxed for, and you're like, well, this kind of stinks. What the heck is this? They're taxing me for all this grain, or they're taxing me for my rations, because there's like a embargo or something on food import from a local kingdom coming in. So those are all kind of things that you can kind of set the tone for things. So if I was going to tax certain goods, such as weapons, or put a tariff, or basically you can't import more than, you know, what we considered standard. Maybe they're just like, well, you can have a long arm, like a long sword or a pole axe or something, or a two-handed sword, and you can have a dagger and then an eating knife or something. And those are the sharp implements you're allowed to have when you come into this territory, because otherwise we think you're not adventurers but people trying to import weaponry for the rebels, and we're trying to stop that. So they could put a punishment on that. But just there, that's informed you what's going on in that kingdom, that it's so bad that they've got to put basically a stop to weapons of war coming into the area. I mean, are they doing that bad in the war? You know, so that just that one stop, which seems kind of not important, like, oh, why did I put it in there as an encounter? Well, that's to tell the players and their characters, that's to inform them what's happening and what's going on in that region. And that's the way we're talking about how big of a deal law, order, and culture and crimes and things develop from that, and how important they are in your region, but not important in the sense you have to have a giant list, but important in the sense that what you show and what you tell is as important as what you don't. So that's what I have to say about that. Oh, elf bait. Yeah, you could also be legally obligated to have those weapons on you, because maybe anybody considered a citizen of the realm at times of war could be conscripted. So basically, you're supposed to have a certain level of kit worth of stuff on you if you're of fighting age, of fighting ability, which as an adventurer you pretty much are of fighting ability unless you're like RPing as the librarian, and even then if you're a player character, you've got a class level in something, which means you're already better at fighting than pretty much a peasant with a pitchfork. Okay, Ramon, you're saying how about races and laws, cultural differences that make laws for some and not other races? So forbid meat for elves. So there could be an instance where you have a race with a particular set of laws, such as maybe elves aren't necessarily on top of most elves not liking eating meat. The idea of it completely turns them off for food, for hunger. But maybe there is an actual law about it, how they're not allowed. So when you're like kind of in, even if you're half-elven adventurers chowing down on a big leg of some critter that you guys just shot with a bow, when they're in elf country, he is like, does all the things he's supposed to do, which includes probably, foregoing meat. Simply because even though he's half-elven, he's considered elf enough for the rule. And that could come up as if you have no elves in your party, they would not know. Maybe the half-elf, his, father or mother passed away. They didn't get a lot of elven culture, so they're more, whatever human culture they hung out in, or maybe they just went off and were raised by a dwarf or whatever, or a tiefling or whatever. So they don't know the elven culture. So they're going and saying, all right, well, I don't know it at all. And they come in, and that's kind of where the conflict arises. I wouldn't think there'd be, if you've got a culture that's forbidding the eating of meat, I don't think there'd be too hefty of a crime. But probably more like social stigma against it, and like kind of like cultural shunning. So I could see that being a thing with an elf, but a dwarf, I don't think someone would tease somebody about stealing and be like, well, you're a cowardly whatever, etc. And you should have fought me in combat if you wanted to get one up me. Maybe that's the dwarven way of it compared to the elven way of it. Streams, yeah, we're back with the stream. Hopefully, I don't know when it stopped, so sorry. So, Dave Miles, for every law created a society, there must have been a problem with that issue. within it to warrant that law's creation. And hodgepodge adds or a political motive. And I would say yes to both of those. You don't want to do more work, especially when you're like a starting community or something like that, and you've got maybe like a couple cities under your belt. You don't want to make rules just for making rules. They all do something, or they're attempting to do something. And that's another thing. You could be burdened with a giant amount of bureaucratic red tape that is just ways of trying to eliminate one little tiny sliver of a problem, and then suddenly you're trying to eliminate 1,000 slivers of a problem. But it just makes it so that your culture stagnates because you're trying to get an inn built, and you have to have so many permits, people signing okay, this okay, this okay, that okay, and don't even think about trying to ask somebody to borrow money for it, because that's going to be an insanity all on its own. So once you get into that kind of level of bureaucracy, there's things that just kind of stagnate, and innovation slows down in that kind of situation. But as far as political motive, I mean, you have a whole bunch of people in the upper echelons of a culture. Political motivation could just simply be, well, what makes me money? I want to continue to make me money. I don't care if other people suffer. So the mines are terrible, but the industry needs coal, and the industry needs steel and minerals and stuff. So the nobles that own the mines are going to continue to absolutely tweak laws that allow them to get miners at a sufficient rate to continue to have miners, for the most part. I mean, they're not going to let they could end up going and saying, well, now we'll have to pay people instead of just making it be prison camp. So I could see that being a motivation for certain rules being made, is simply to add more prisoners to the mining system. Oh, was that on Twitch, really? Boo. Alright. If you could explain that to them. And I can't start it back up. And I don't know why I dropped it. At least I don't think I can start it back up. Yeah, I don't think I can start it back up. Sorry, we're having some issues tonight. Elfbait, you have in Washington, there's an old law that says you have to be given $20 and a horse upon release from jail. I guess that's because if you didn't have those things, you would most likely just have to resort to crime. So you need a horse to get around to do work, or to leave the area if you wish. And $20 is probably enough for you to live for a bit until you get a job, or not live out on the streets and things. So that makes sense. I mean, give the person enough money after they paid their sentence to go off and do some things. So, do they still give people $20 and a horse when they get out of jail? I'd be interested to know if someone could be like, hey, you have to give me my horse and you have to give me my $20. Hey, you're back. Almost. Howdy.
Am I back?
You look back.
Oh,
The Streamination says you're back, pretty much.
Okay. All right, cool.
So when you said your computer froze, you had to restart it. I was like, did it die 10,000 times? What's going on?
No, it did a full I'm done living my life, time to keel over and died.
Wow.
Yeah, which freaked me out. But it was not the end of the world. It is fixed now. I had to figure out what happened, and it looks like the USB port that my camera was plugged into died. So it literally ate the whole computer, and I just had to switch to USB port. Are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live. You know,
Hi, everyone.
We lost Twitch, which I'm very sad about.
When that happened, we lost Twitch?
Right after you fell off the planet, I think we lost Twitch. So I don't know if it was the same time. We can blame your USB port.
I doubt it was my USB port, but I feel like that's perfectly acceptable. Hi, everybody.
We're talking about different things in... Well, someone brought up that you... Washington State, you get $20 and a horse when you get out of jail to kind of like get yourself back up on your feet. Elfbait brought it up, but that's an old law, and I would say that if it's still in the books and I got out of jail, I'd be like, look, I don't want to sue you, but I want a horse. So we're gonna do this, or am I gonna have to get the law involved here? Don't break the rules. I hear you go to prison for that.
There were so many crazy rules as I try and get my machine working correctly again. There were so many rules. There was a law, and I don't remember which state this was in, but there was a law that if you were driving an automobile, a carriage, a horseless cart, that if you drove down the road and there was a horse on the road, you had to take your cart off the road and disassemble it until the horse had passed, which I always thought was just incredibly funny. I'm really sorry about that, everyone. I'm pretty sure my camera just decided to eat my USB port.
That's okay.
Yeah, it was really unfortunate. I can't believe we lost Twitch on that too.
Yeah, I'm displeased with that.
Anyway, so where were we?
I kind of got thrown through a loop when you weren't here to bounce ideas off of and reading chat. And
Reading chat.
Yeah, we got into some kind of different law discussions. I'm trying to bring it back and see. Oh, we talked about... Dave Miles brought up a really important thing, that basically the laws don't just come out of nowhere. They're usually written for a reason. And then someone else chimed in, I think Hodgepodge, said that political motivation also can motivate why a law's written. And
absolutely.
I would say that's a major big deal. Both those concepts is that, like, your basically the way your culture develops informs the law structure you use over time, and who decides on that law structure at the time. And then you also have political motivation for constructing laws, and you also have kind of like, I guess, there's feedback going on in the system for different things like that. But I'd say there's less feedback on things like if a king and a whole bunch of his noble people make a law, pretty much everyone...
Well, kings have typically changed their legal system from king to king. Like, you have some laws that stayed consistent, but then you have like entirely different sects. Like, there was a king who changed the laws on marriage quite a few times. He was like, well, divorce is okay if I'm doing it, and I have a good reason. And the only time you could divorce a wife and marry a new wife, I think this is the way it went. The only time you could divorce a woman and marry a new woman is if the woman you are divorcing is dead. So in order to facilitate the process, he had their heads chopped off.
Yeah.
And
all he had to do was figure out a reason to make that legit.
Yeah.
He should have just said, he could have made a whole lot more sense and done a lot less things crazy. If he had just said, you know what? I'm the freaking king. I'm just going to marry somebody else. I'll have 2 wives. I'll have 7 wives. Who the heck cares?
Ramon Dozel said, how about talk about reasons behind the laws for fantasy world, historical, magical, political, by examples? I think really it's very easy if you don't want to have to put a ton of time and energy into dictating the kinds of laws that are being used. you can always fall back to the standard issue Western fantasy. Western fantasy is castles and King Arthur and wizards, and most of the time in those systems, what you end up having is a monarch that's basically going to pick what happens in most cases. And then whoever is immediately below the king that has the most political power or the most sway or the ear of the king, that person is then going to dictate laws. And many times it just comes down to the judgment of an individual rather than a law for a given area. Modern functional legal systems like what we have in most of the world right now, I don't think it would be as easy to have such the same kind of enforceable legal system. I mean, just look at the West. I mean, in early settlement of the West, the legal system was kind of what the federal government said, but it was also whatever that dude Bob with the pistol said.
Yes.
You know, that's...
it was like a hybrid, might makes right / I'm backed up by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you had the might, you could also get close to making the right.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it was, you know, small groups.
And Aaron Park said merchants are a big determiner of laws, and there's a variety of instances where laws can, if you watch the, what was that? It's a Shakespeare play, The Merchant of Venice.
Mm-hmm.
Basically the people with the largest amount of influence, and typically influence and money go hand in hand, but not always. The people with the largest amount of influence are going to be, or money are going to be, the people that are going to get to dictate what they think is the right action, especially in situations where there's a lot on the line. Like there's unrest and all of the poor people are like on the verge of rioting. What's the law going to be? Well, the king says, I don't care what the poor people say, send the troops out.
Mm.
Or the merchant says, I'd like you to send the troops out and quell the poor people, and here's a ton of money. Or I'm your brother-in-law, here's a ton of influence, you know?
As far as merchanting, you need a certain level of stability to really have a lot of people buy into the concept of making a business or settling into an area to craft something. They have to say, there's a future in this for me.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to do it if they can't say that phrase, and if they can't tell if that has a good chance of happening, there's also a good chance that most of them won't take the risk. So in times of instability, you're going to have a reduction in commerce and trade, which could in effect make more instability. So when a whole bunch of merchants with money come to you and say, hey, this needs to be dealt with, or we can't deal in these areas because we're either getting robbed or killed or whatever, or having our stuff taken from us, we're not going to continue doing that. So if you want these areas to do something besides turn into wastelands and lawless areas, give us some protection here. Make an outpost someplace. Do something. Make it a certain punishable offense to do XYZ to a gilded merchant. Because anybody could say they're a merchant. But if we pay to have it happen, then hey, there you go. You get money to enforce this, and we pay money for safety.
If you ever would like to give yourself some variables to work with, sometimes it's just easier to be creative when you have some kind of foundation. In D&D, I know that I have certain constraints. No guns, no tanks, no airplanes. Okay, so I don't have to come up with that any of that information. But sometimes it's good to have a foundation. One of the things I really, really enjoy doing is, what is the intelligence, wisdom, and charisma of my king or queen, and how old are they? How long have they been in power? Just answering those questions I guarantee you'll flesh out a huge amount of legal code and how this ruler has impacted upon the immediate culture, and just basic concepts can help you flesh that kind of stuff out. So if you're trying to come up with a king and you're like, I have a random kingdom, I don't know what to put in there, roll some stats for him. Is he an idiot? If you have zero common sense, is he like a 9-year-old that they just threw on that's the person next in line?
I guess
low
stats because he's the next in line.
Yeah. Like, is it a youngin? Is this dude 80 years old, super paranoid with low intelligence, low wisdom, low charisma, just the worst case scenario, and so you end up with a mess? It's illegal for cows to face east. How are we supposed to enforce this? You know what I mean? Like, you never know what you could end up with. So
sorry.
What's that?
The cows facing east has just caught me. I don't know why.
Well, you always end up, it depends on their perspective. If the person's crazy and thinks they're literally a living god, they could come up with some weird laws.
Because it offends some deity or something like that.
Right. The cows should know better. I'm a living god. They should know not to face east.
And
they become
and then
hamburgers.
The peasants say, but how are we supposed to enforce that? The cows need to graze.
You go through a kingdom, your players are walking through the kingdom, and they notice that every single cow has been tied up to face west. And they're like, why is that happening?
Yeah.
And they find out through this weird scene of tied up cows facing west that it's this crazy king.
And then one guy coming around with a penalty and a big giant sword to cut the poor cow's head off. Exactly. He's like, I'm just enforcing the rules. I'm just enforcing the laws. So okay, as far as the king and his stats, I would say also the king's advisors. Or queen, yes. Monarchy is what I should have been saying from the beginning. So your monarchy, as basically whoever is the top monarch, plus his advisors, plus like an idea of what's going on in the region, I think would help inform you on what's what. Right.
Figure out what the top person is. From there, you should be able to make determinations about family. A really fun thing to do. I loved doing this in my own campaign. All of the noble families are humans. All of the merchants and most of the populace of the city-state is human. The king and the queen are elves. And everybody hates it. And so there's this and of course the king and the queen. So what I had was basically the king and the queen led an army to protect the city, and the people decided that they wanted these saviors of the city to rule. And so the saviors ruled, and of course I'm dumbing things way down, but the saviors ended up ruling. But that was 500 years ago. And so opinions have changed since then. They're not heroes anymore. They're just not like everyone else, so we don't like them.
Yeah, and you know, great people don't necessarily tend to be good people, because great people had to have made some choices that weren't that great.
Yeah.
So all birds must die because they look down upon the king when they fly.
Yeah.
Gene you've got this rebellious druid group trying to stop the law, this madness.
Yeah, and a variety of other things. One of my favorite things I ever did was, and this goes to the mageocracy, was inquisitors with these creatures that could smell magic. Oh, that was the best. I love the dark setting and the inquisitor with the hound. Looks like Elroy smells something. You know, they're like, what's going on? Yeah.
We just need to sniff you down, that's all. If you're not a lawbreakers, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, so determining family. Determining any beliefs that may be extremist. More mild beliefs probably aren't going to do anything super crazy. You might take some notes on those, but extremist
quirkiness. There's a quirkiness factor that you go, huh, when you hear about some certain things and how they're going on.
Yeah. Every Tuesday night, everyone has to be completely silent for 5 minutes in remembrance of some old king that died heroically. And the current king takes it super seriously. And if you made any noise, you're in trouble. The guards will scoop you out of your house. My players would be like, I cast prestidigitation.
Dong, dong.
What's the loudest thing we can do, guys?
Yeah, a church bell,
like
a gong, a warning gong ringing. I think we could do those for 5 minutes straight. So Aaron Parks is a question: would a chaotic culture leave whatever punishment for crimes to the victims or next of kin to the victim? And I would say it's not necessarily chaotic if there is this idea of punishment not necessarily fitting the crime as in vengeance, but fitting the crime as in correction. So if there's a big cultural push, or like basically the rules of the culture are as such that our society is building towards some kind of amazing future or something. So you want to, instead of punishing them so that they won't do it again, you want to punish them so that they don't think it's a good idea to do it again. So it's not necessarily violence, but altering of perspective. So the person might think long and hard, a victim or a victim's family might think long and hard about what kind of punishment would fit the crime to correct it so that the crime does not happen again. That isn't just killing the person. It won't happen. That person won't commit any more crimes because they're dead.
Yeah.
They're dead and gone.
There's also Elfbait's talking about skirting the law, and this is actually common practice still today, where people do things that are just barely legal. No gambling on King's Day, but the law technically reads no coin may trade hands. So everybody gambles with prizes or vouchers. That actually happens in Japan right now.
Oh
They
yeah,
have gambling
pachinko,
halls.
pachinko,
Yeah,
or whatever.
pachinko
right?
halls. They go in the pachinko hall. If you guys aren't familiar, they go in the pachinko hall. You spend all your money to get these vouchers. Then you walk around the corner and they have a shop where you can trade it in for money. And because it's two different businesses, it's not, yeah.
Yeah, so that's all they needed to do was separate it out, and you play with these like little metal balls in a cool like pinballish kind of machine. I actually have two of them. One of them works and makes some really awesome sounds, and the other one, something's wrong with the other one.
There are lots of ways, especially when we're talking about guilds, merchant guilds. In merchant guilds, the simplest way, this is usually the explanation I give. The simplest way to explain.
I don't know what's up with it. Oh, you know what? I'm not sure. Someone could be playing video games or something, but I doubt that's happening. Well, we can't blame this on Twitch, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think I was trying to change the lighting level.
You sneezed, and that's what's the problem.
And it all blew up.
Yep.
I was trying to change the lighting level on my camera, and it just kicked everything off, and I was like, switch USB ports? What just happened? I was worried it ate my camera. My camera is not a cheap camera. I would have been very upset about that.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Back.
Yay, and dancing apparently. Wonderful.
So, missed our explanation. Oh no.
What explanation? Oh, right, of guilds. Right. So, sorry about that. So, Nate is a blacksmith. I'm a blacksmith. Now I'm scared if I say the explanation again, it'll blow up the stream. Nate's a blacksmith and I'm a blacksmith. Nate's part of the guild. So in city limits, Nate can practice blacksmithing and trade whatever he wants. I'm not part of the guild. I'm not allowed to blacksmith in town, and I'm not allowed to sell my stuff. So my only recourse as a blacksmith is to sell my stuff to Nate for a pittance so that he can sell it. So laws like that, and then trying to find ways to skirt around those laws. Like maybe I stay at home and blacksmith all day, and then I keep showing my stuff to maybe guild leaders or whatever, so that I can try and get an edge in on the market. But ultimately, in order to get invited into the market, even Twitch is back.
Yes,
oh, that's funny.
Silliness. You're saying so.
But yeah, so in order to get in on a guild-based market, essentially they're waiting for Nate to die. Nate makes a certain amount of money. The guild makes sure that Nate's the only person who's able to sell, so he gets to set prices. And then if I want to get into the market, I just basically have to wait for Nate to keel over so that they'll want another blacksmith to control the market with.
But my idiot first son doesn't want to be a blacksmith. The fool.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Right.
So then, but all the rest of them are like, yes, when he's done or when he retires, I'll get to be a blacksmith, a guild blacksmith.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about market control with guilds, which is why they're illegal now.
Well, you know what? There is probably would have been a nice benefit, a little bit of market control on all the people getting degrees. Because I gotta say, there's a lot of people that got degrees that are not going to be using it for what they got the degree for. And if that's what they wanted, that's fine. But if they were going out there with the purpose of getting a job based on the degree, then we say, all right, well, you've did this training basically, and now you can't get a job on what you've trained for. But if there was some kind of regulatory force, not like a heavy-handed regulatory force, but basically something that kind of informed you the way a market was going, so you had like at least a little bit of an educated guest in there, besides just like what your dad said or your uncle or your aunt or your sister is like, oh yeah, you should be a nurse, XYZ reason. Or you should go into electrical work for XYZ reason. And you're just like, but okay, I like that stuff. So then you do it and you find out, oh, there's like 1,000 people in your area waiting for a job to open up for that. They're all trained. They're all good at what they do. Now they're literally waiting for someone to die or move. And yeah, that's like 1,000 people that are just going to be waiting for a while. So at that point, you're like, well, okay, so now I've wasted time, energy, and resource to develop this concept. And now you're stuck in kind of like a situation where a little more guidance might have helped. But anyway.
Which is why small towns end up with incredibly skilled craftsmen, and it's because the guild won't let them sell along certain trade routes or in the city proper or in nearby towns. And so you have like a blacksmith who's so skilled he just cranks out +1 swords all day, living in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. If he's this good, he could be rich. And you're like, no, he's great, but he's not the blacksmith guildmaster's son, so here he is.
You take his sword over to that town, they'll break it with a hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
A magic hammer, I guess, if it's +1 swords, Kienata. Goodness
it's
gracious.
a +1. He's just cranking them out. +1 swords all day long. One a day, every day. +1 swords right here, real +1.
Verified +1.
Verified +1 swords. You can see the bonus when you swing it.
Little counter read on the side of your iris.
Yeah, so
that's a good segue into mageocracy, I think.
Mageocracy.
We haven't talked enough about mageocracy. We've got 15 minutes left.
We have 15 minutes to talk about
not enough
mageocracy.
time, so we shouldn't even start, right?
We have to.
Yeah, I agree. So, mageocracy, there's going to be certain rules based on the level of the society. So, you're going to have an issue, let's go with the top-down approach. So you've got like an empire, maybe founded by a wizard.
My favorite place for a mageocracy is a big foreboding empire.
So let's say an empire founded by a wizard, because he just smashed every other person that was competent that tried to take it from him, or he took it from the last guy because that last guy was not a wizard. Maybe wizards are extremely rare. So anyway,
Darth Vader.
The first, Darth Vader, where there's
Palpatine.
Yeah, they already got rid of all the Jedi. So there you go. They already got rid. Mage Empire. One word. So you've got this guy in charge, and you know he's starting to get old, and he's had some apprentices, and he's had some other people, but he's always
apprentices.
He's always worried that someone's going to take over. So what he does is he really leans hard on education and being able to know about wizardry and also to study and test, because he's going to take the highest. He's basically going to take the highest powered group of wizards that he can gather throughout his empire, and they're going to be his army. And that's how his empire, he started when it was just a kingdom, and now it's an empire because of that scenario occurring. You go around with a whole bunch of war wizards, you're going to mop up archers and fighters and things.
Yeah.
A sea of fireballs, well, just like a volley of fireballs into an army. They're like, aside from the commanders, they're probably all peasants or like standard soldier. So a standard little soldier can't take a fireball to the face. He's gone. So you've got these people that just win all the time with their wizardry power, and you've got this scenario where eventually there is a lockdown, or maybe a paranoia ensues, and this person is worried of being overthrown. So he may kind of like keep his enemies closer in that idea. So maybe there's the main kingdom, wherever the central point of the kingdom is a mage school, so he can watch the highest powered ones and what they're doing, and what they'll kind of like take the temperature of the school, and he can learn a lot about
take
that.
The temperature.
I couldn't think of a good metaphoric thing.
Harry Potter, right? Okay, cool. Could you go in there, please? Just a closet of knives. Shink. Okay. One down. Here's kind of my thing. Full credit to my favorite mageocracy of all time, Dark Sun. Dark Sun is, in my opinion, the old school, the original, for me, for the stuff I read, the original mageocracy. Dragon King eats all the bad people. Dragon King becomes bad people, or bad people becomes dragon, becomes Dragon King. Dragon King becomes basically a living god, and like literally living god, not I'm a living god because I said so, but like really a living god. And then all of his minions get their power directly from him. And this very conveniently answers the question, well, what if one of your subordinates gets powerful? Well, I don't care if one of my if one of my subordinates gets powerful, I just snip, you don't get any more power. You're gonna come in here with your hands glowing with arcane energy, I will take you down, evil king, and then you're like, no more power. Someone stab him. Like, that's it. You're done. So
no, I would argue that it's probably not that easy to give and take power away. To give power out and take it away. But that would be really funny if no one knew that you could have it taken away. Or that they thought it was the item that blessed them with the power, and that it was just the king or emperor that doled out these items. And then when you realize it's actually like a Dragon King pact warlock, and you're like, no, I just shut the tap off, man. You're done.
Yeah, exactly.
Stab that guy in the face. He's done. Yeah,
exactly.
So that is a good way to, I'd say, control, because you've got this kind of like institutional power, and you've got the strong arm, which is in this case in Dark Sun, it's the Templars, that are going around and basically being as heavy-handed as they want, because they have these extra powers that normal citizens don't have.
Except for the Preservers. Oh, you think I don't remember? I remember, son. I am carrying my nerd card right now. The Preservers. This was the Preservers' secret symbol. These are the good guys that want to change the world back into a beautiful living world again. Defilers destroy life energy around them when they cast spells, but the Preservers wanted to create life, and they could go kind of the opposite direction of Dragon Kings and become a huge floppy bug-eyed manta ray looking thing. I don't even know what that was supposed to be. I have my Dragon Kings book over here, but anyway, So the Preservers had a secret society of spellcasters, and most of the
Avangayon, by the way.
It was what?
Avangayon.
Okay, yeah. So
-5 nerd points. Oh, Aaron Parks, yes. Avangayon, I'm pretty sure. The Preserver counterpart to the dragon.
oh, okay, there we go.
So that's how I think it would kind of get built up. But then kind of controlling regular citizens, you'd have a certain level of... There'd have to be some kind of way of judging wizards. And for the most part, citizenry would know, hey, you know, there's no unlicensed wizardry.
Right.
You're either have your seal from the king, from the emperor, or hit one of his groupies, or you better go talk to them if you've come to this kingdom and you need to like basically sign up and be registered. I think that would be a major thing.
I think it absolutely, but it's very important to develop a structure for this kind of thing. Because if I say my structure is, well, if you act out as a wizard, I can just send my goon squad of more powerful wizards. In any kind of civilized culture, that's going to breed dissent. That's going to create a group that wants to resist the goon squad. But if you are more clever a ruler and you say instead you'll be judged by a peer, you'll be judged by a peer of your elders. If you're instead judged by a peer of your elders, then you will have to come up with a system for controlling a mage so that they can be judged. If you're standing on a pedestal in front of me and you can cast 6th level mage spells, and it's a big room full of peers, and we're deciding whether that fireball you cast was illegal or not, you could act out. You could easily kill everyone in the room. So how are we controlling you? What's our method of keeping you in check so that we can pass judgment?
Well, I mean, if we're all talking about 6th level spells, they probably got you geezed, and they've probably got you not only geezed while you're under investigation or whatever, but they probably have you slapped with some other kind of things. They might just be preventing you from casting spells by encasing you in some kind of armament so that you can't do particular motions. It could be, you know, something that just as simply straps your forearms to your upper arms, so you can still move your. You can still do this, but... If
you're a spellcaster, you know better than to think that verbal and semantics the only way you're going to get a spell off.
There's also just flat out people waiting for you to cast a spell and counterspell it, right?
Well, but you'd want to be able to have... There has to be the outward perception of civility. Even if it's not really there. Even if it's a mock trial, it has to look civil. So... Like right now, you have a convict, you shackle them to the floor at the table where they're being judged at. So, and the manacles, it's wrists and ankles, and it's attached to the floor. Okay, they're not going anywhere. Like they're not going to hurt something. Right. So any number of solutions, but I think it's important that once you've introduced an anti-magic solution, that anti-magic solution is also going to be disseminated into other places where it's useful.
Yeah, and then they'll be used for kidnappings and all kinds of stuff.
That's where I'm headed. You've got your Muggle soldiers. Your Muggle soldiers are going to have some kind of nasty anti-magic device that they can shackle up a whiz-biz they captured. Your police force, you can't fill the ranks with just wizards, so your police force is probably going to have a bunch of Muggles in it that are going to need a way to deal with whiz-biz. So there's going to be some kind of a large amount of available anti-magic tools in the world. And once those exist, there's no taking them back.
Put your spell book on the table and play Thumb War with yourself.
Yeah.
Until we've got the shackles on.
Is this necessary? This seems a little weird.
Shut your mouth. It's absolutely necessary.
Did you know this is how I cast Magic Missile? This is the semantics.
And saying magic. Oh gosh, Magic Missile.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a live one here. Get out the stun
Anti-magic.
cannons.
Anti-magic man catcher, Electrum anti-magic, restrained casters in my world, magic branding. I have used branding before, and it once the brand is on you, unless you take that whole chunk of skin off, you can't cast spells. I have used that before, but the problem is context. We always have to remember context because this ultimately takes us back to Iron Hill turnips. So I can brand someone, and they can't cast spells anymore. Exactly.
People will be like, I sneak attack and brand the BBEG.
Someone's going to have... I have a mace that has the anti-magic brand on the head of it, and I just cast heat metal and just go to town on WizBiz.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Like, well, that's not even very creative. I bet the people in chat could outdo me in an instant. That's just an idea I had right now. Like, people will really, really, really abuse those tools if they're available. So it's very important to consider it carefully.
Which is why you should probably just reduce it to sniffing doggy things. And, just enforceable rules that when they get out of hand, well, you've gone rogue. You're not paying attention to the rules of the culture, to the rules of the kingdom. And we're going to deal with you accordingly, which may be execution or banishment.
Well, I will ooze out very quickly. We have 3 minutes left. I will ooze out
really?
very quickly.
I must be feeling better.
Right.
It doesn't even feel like it's getting close.
Okay, so my Inquisitors, they get an anti-magic collar that goes around their neck. Spells just can't affect them. But they used to be spellcasters, so they can't use their magic anymore. Instead, they burn spell slots in order to get physical attributes. So you could have...
like Arcana juicers.
Right. So you'd be like, bam, 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 and shoot it or stab him or whatever. And he's lost a ton of hit points, and he just regenerates the stuff by burning some spell slots. Or he punches you and makes his strength 20 for just a second by burning some spell slots or whatever. So they were super physically tough. So I basically made all of my Inquisitors ex-spellcaster juicers.
Nice.
Yeah, with a dog that can smell you from a mile away.
That's some good stuff there. I like that. Aaron
There
Park
you go.
suggests you could just break their hands and heal them if they're not found not guilty. Yikes. Ooh.
Okay, that's dark. That's dark.
Defiant Mars says maybe there are levels on the mark, like a temporary tattooed for minor offenses and brands for major felonies.
Surprise, Timmy. No more enchantments. See, this is what I mean. You got to be really careful with
Now
it.
you're going to rage like the Hulk.
But I have had players who were literally like, oh, really? The Inquisitor's dead? I put his collar on. Just in an instant. I would rather be able to just summon super strength than cast spells anymore. I put the collar on. I'm like, you have no ability to use melee weapons. And they're like, I don't care. I'm going to burn spell slots and punch people.
This is my melee weapon.
Yeah,
Just say
this
it
is
in
my
an Arnold
fist.
voice.
This fist is my melee weapon. I'll crush you. Get to the chopper.
So Old Grumpy says anything anti-magic would be expensive and be kind of like is as a unnatural effect basically. And it's like, yes, you'd have to have a higher level. If you're going to have like a true mageocracy, you're going to have a higher level of magic, which means magic items are going to be more prolific and used to solve more problems.
It depends. In my
Paizo.
setting, magic is very suppressed in that kingdom. There isn't magic items everywhere. There's just the collars and the boss guy. It was a boss girl, but still. Yeah.
Well, it is that time. I'm saying we're going to wrap up because otherwise we'll go for another hour, and we all have our things to do. Thanks we had a great chat tonight, guys, by Corey. Love it. Peace. Thank you very much for that. And also, thanks to everyone for joining us. Let us know what you think.
And sticking with us through
and thinking through it. And, we could... there's plenty of stuff we could go on doing that. So... I'm going to have to say we've got to cut out quits. So, thanks for joining us this Sunday evening. Let us know what you think in the comments below. While you're at, like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to check out some of our cool links. We've got the Hit Dice to Heroics, which is a new product for Nerdarchy. We also have, you can join the Nerdarchy Discord to talk more about this stuff after the show. And also we have the Nerdarchy newsletter. We can sign up for our tips as well as how to game with Nerdarchy. So until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.